Hello, hello. It is the Week 10 matchup graphs, floors versus ceilings. Looking at that adjusted matchup rank on the bottom. How good is that matchup compared to their schedule to kind of set that ceiling? And the floor is the volume rank on the left. How good is that projected volume on the week? There's a couple new guys as the number one projected volume compared to the normal. For receivers, it's Drake London actually. Starting with those shadow corners, London maybe will be shadowed with Sauce Gardner coming in, but it's only like 2 days notice, so it's hard to predict whether Sauce will actually shadow him because the Colts have been using those type of shadow corners, traveling with those top receivers pretty consistently, but we'll see what happens with London. But either way, projected for that number one volume, still an amazing receiver. Egbuka is going to be having the matchup that London had last week, where he was incredible versus Christian Gonzalez, who's going to be shadowing Egbuka now. A lot of the production in terms of those big plays, the touchdowns primarily, was Drake London being utilized out of the slot in the red zone and being really creative with them there, which was really nice to see. Egbuka can obviously run out of the slot too, can avoid him a little bit for sure, but maybe doesn't have that big play contested catch upside as much as Drake London, who's like the best in the NFL at it. So not the greatest matchup in the world, but I like how this Tampa Bay passing defense, Baker Mayfield, I'll talk later, is set up against the Patriots. Tez Johnson down in the bottom right, who will be out of the slot, maybe can take advantage of Egbuka being shadowed a little bit by Gonzalez, has a solid matchup overall, and the Patriots have allowed a lot of those big-time plays. They're 29th in the explosive plays, so it gives Tez Johnson a decent shot as the flyer this week. Some of the other shadows, they don't matter as much compared to normal, at least. Jefferson is going to be getting Nate Wiggins in Baltimore. They haven't really been using him as that shadow corner yet up until this week or the last couple. So we'll see how that works out with Jefferson, but not really anything that changes. Waddle, kind of same thing. Benford doesn't really change too much compared to what we've seen this year. They played Buffalo in week 3, and him and Tyreek Hill, Waddle and Tyreek Hill, were basically the exact same. Waddle had 5 catches, 39 yards, and a touchdown. Hill had 5 catches, 49 yards, and a touchdown. So it's okay overall against a Buffalo defense that does force a lot of rushing. I think I'll talk about that later with Achane, but they force a lot of rushing. Odunze is that last guy. Put up the goose egg last week. Not many people are happy with him right now. He's got the shadow with Adebo. Again, one that you're not really like changing too much in your mindset with it. I actually don't mind Odunze this week. And I think everybody is going to basically bench him if they have the opportunity, just because he's been what he's been these last month or so. 3 out of the 4 games, he's been pretty awful. But this matchup, the Giants play more man coverage than anybody in the NFL, and that is where he's been that like top 5, top 10 fantasy receiver is when he's going against man coverage. He's going to see that 43% of the time. At least that's what the Giants have played so far. So like it overall for Odunze. Over on the far right here, we got Robinson in the slot matchup, number 1 against the Bears. He's had double-digit targets in 2 of his last 3 games. So I don't mind him, even like as a floor option. He's a little inconsistent, but when he does get the targets, it's a lot. And I think this is a good spot to get those targets. When we're looking at the Eagles receivers, A.J. Brown close to him right there, but Devontae Smith is not. They are different just because of their alignment. A.J. Brown, 95% of the time in this offense, sadly, is on the outside. Devontae Smith, over 60% of the time on the inside in the slot. And the Green Bay defense, they've been a lot better against tight ends and those slot receivers than they have been against those receivers on the outside. They do force a lot of passing. They don't play too much man coverage. I'll talk about that with Hurts later. But overall, like it better for A.J. Brown. He's practicing in full, so that's really nice. So I would say Brown over Smith this week, but volume should be fine for both of them. Deebo Samuel here with Mariota in the green. Still don't love it. Without Jaden Daniels, it's really tough for Mariota. He's had 2 out of his 3 games with Mariota go for under 5 fantasy points. So it's just tough to play any guy like that. Even the game that he played well in, 6 targets, like it's not anything incredible. So I don't love it, even though he's in the green. He's projected for good volume. The rushing helps a little bit, I guess, but I'm still not confident overall. Moving over to the left here, Zay Flowers is someone that eventually, he's one of those guys where the volume is better than his touchdown production, especially in this offense, because you always want to look at context. Jerry Jeudy right now, he has 1 billion targets and no touchdowns. Do I think that's going to change? Not really. Like, he'll score one eventually, but it's not going to be ever just bouncing back in a way. Zay Flowers with Lamar Jackson, Baltimore is averaging 32 points per game. Zay Flowers has 60 targets this year, and he has 1 touchdown. So even though it's not the greatest matchup in the world, like Zay Flowers, he has better days ahead overall in terms of the touchdowns at least. Doubs close to him, a little bit of a tougher matchup than even this would suggest maybe, just because Cooper DeJean is most likely going to move outside with the new additions off the bye week for the Eagles. So I like Doubs going forward more than most, I would say. But in terms of this matchup, it makes it a little tougher. And to the left of him is Olave. I don't have much faith in Shuck. At least Olave, for his sake, Shaheed was taking nearly 30% of the targets with Shuck. So maybe that changes some. But again, so the volume is up there this week for his projection, but the matchup I still don't love. And one last flyer at the bottom here, sadly he's become a flyer at this point, is Jameson Williams. They talked him up for the 100th time, and they did actually use him last week. So we'll see if they use him this week, but it is a good matchup overall against a Washington secondary because, as you see, he's in the red. How is it a good matchup? The volume is lower. That matchup is 11th right now, but Lattimore's hurt. And Washington's 32nd in explosives. So it matches up well for Williams. So if you need a flyer, actually don't mind JMO this week. Up in this top right, we got James Cook, who's played this Miami defense before, over 100 yards, a touchdown, no shock. This is the rushing fantasy production matchup only, just because James Cook is getting no receiving, but Miami is 29th on the ground against running backs. They're 31st against explosive carries. Sets up well for a guy like James Cook, who is going to play this week, so that's always nice. Quinshon Judkins should get similar rushing volume this week. It's going to be a close game, at least projected that way, against the Jets defense. That's the worry for this Browns offense a lot. But when you have a game that should be closer, should have a lot of rushing volume, versus a Jets defense that's not the greatest in terms of running backs in fantasy, and they lose their best player in Quinton Williams on top of Sauce Gardner. That doesn't affect Judkins too much. But in terms of that inside defense tackle, who's that dominant run stuffer, you lose him, then what happens? So I like Judkins this week overall. Dowdle is over here in the middle, but if we do just go off of the rushing fantasy production allowed, the Saints are 28th. And it's not necessarily because they're not a good rushing defense, it's just because the Saints are not winning many games. And with Shuck in there, I would expect more of the same. 5-4 Panthers team, Dowdle in his wins, similar to Judkins, getting a ton of volume. All 3 of his starts, 25 carries per game, basically. So overall in this matchup where he's projected for 23 carries, more carries than anybody in terms of that projection, it's a little lower receiving, but I really like Dowdle in that matchup too. Staying up top here in terms of this volume, guys, we got Achane over here on the left, who has dominated Buffalo in the past. And Buffalo does force a lot of the rushing game. They've been a running funnel this year, and they haven't allowed too many passing attacks to do too well against them. A lot of teams try to run on them. Achane, I would say, my theory more so, is Miami a lot of their running attack, especially right now with no Tyreek Hill and they can't separate as much, is the screens to Achane. In the last 3 games against Buffalo, I was thinking this before I looked at the stats, so it's not confirmation, but confirming my theory was looking at receiving for Achane the last 3 times against Buffalo. He's had 7 receptions in all 3 games, including earlier this year. So I would expect the same. Good amount of rushing volume, but also just getting those quick throws out to Achane just because they're not going to be able to push the ball downfield as consistently, I would say. Going back to the green here, though, TreVeyon Henderson had 20 opportunities last week. That's great. A tougher defense. He's in the green, but that's because of the receiving. So if he can take advantage of the receiving matchup here, that's a positive, but they are 7th best on the ground in terms of running backs, 27th against receiving. It is one of the worst offensive line, defensive line matchups in general. So Tampa Bay wouldn't necessarily say it's a positive matchup just because most of the work still, obviously, for Henderson is coming on the ground. Tampa Bay's running backs also not set up great. So Buck Irving up here, but if he doesn't play, Rachaad White, I'm not too confident in White this week. Bucky, good enough. White, you're solely relying on that touchdown happening or a really big receiving day just because their run defense has been incredible overall. They still have not allowed a single running back to have 50 rushing yards against them. So Tampa Bay running backs, New England running backs, not the greatest in the world. I'd rather have Henderson over White, though, if I had to choose between those 2 in particular. And Kamara down here in the red, I'm shocked that he's even projected inside the top 20 for the volume. I would have him lower. just my personal opinion. He's had under 10 opportunities in back-to-back games. He hasn't had over 15 since week 4. So the targets are down, but also even without Kendre Miller, the rushing volume is down. This offense right now is a mess. I don't love it overall. And Breece Hall to his left in a pretty horrible spot as well against the Browns, where the Jets, they aren't throwing the ball too much. They're trading everybody away. I don't think the rushing volume will be there in this game, and the rushing matchup certainly isn't. And lastly, quarterbacks, a new number 1 here too as well in terms of projected volume. It is Jaxson Dart. Why? Well, mainly because of the rushing volume that he's had. He's had a rushing touchdown in 4 straight games, and a lot of that is because since he became the starter, his red zone designed runs are at 12. The next closest is Jalen Hurts at 6, 2 times more than the cheat code of Jalen Hurts in terms of that red zone rushing attack is Jaxson Dart right now. So overall, matchup, not bad at all. Volume, looks incredible. Really like him. Justin Herbert, who is relying on those passing yards particularly, but just like those explosive pass plays, all that sort of stuff, gets a Pittsburgh defense who has been atrocious recently. The one worry is like without Joe Alt or without these offensive tackles, like can they pressure the quarterback? But their numbers aren't as good as their names. Like, yeah, they have Cam Hayward and TJ Watt are big, but their pressure is below average. And in terms of the passing yards allowed, these last 5 games, they have allowed over 340 passing yards to 4 out of the last 5 quarterbacks. The one guy that they held under to 340 is Dylan Gabriel, who still had his career high in passing yards against the Steelers defense. So where's the is it projected for 300 passing yards against this defense right now? Like, it's insane. Insane. They're averaging on the entire season 300 passing yards per game. So Herbert, still like him overall against this Steelers defense. McCarthy to the left of him has the best matchup on the day because 30th. So not 31st or 32nd in terms of those defenses. That's because the Bengals and Cowboys are on bye. So for this week, McCarthy has the best matchup. Baltimore, they've been allowing a lot of passing, obviously, but also McCarthy can get some on the ground if he is forced to scramble some. 9 yards per scramble this year, which is really good. That's like the level of Caleb Williams and Josh Allen is like who he's next to in terms of when he is scrambling. He's actually been pretty efficient over it. Similar to Mayfield. Left of him, his yards per scramble have been amazing overall, like one of the best in the NFL. Number 1, Justin Herbert, by the way. But Mayfield, off of his bye last year, for whatever it's worth, 300 yards, 20 points. Tampa Bay put up 30 points. So he's off the bye now. What happens there in a good matchup? Jalen Hurts was talking about him being off the bye. He has his normal corny quotes. So maybe Jalen Hurts plays a little better against this Packers defense, who should force a lot of the passing. That pass rate has been not even average, good over this past month for the Eagles. They've been passing a lot more. But again, that Packers defense plays a lot of zone coverage. Obviously, good defense overall, pressures the quarterback. So I think it is going to be more, can Jalen Hurts get that volume? But I would say he should, at least in the passing volume, especially in this matchup. Penix Jr. in this bottom right in the yellow here. Good matchup, you would think. And then you remember that this entire secondary gets back healthy, and they add Sauce Gardner. So Jalen Jones is coming in, Kenny Moore is back in the slot, and they add Sauce Gardner. So basically their 3 top corners are back now, or added in. So not the greatest matchup in the world actually for the Colts. The game script, matches up well. They're touchdown underdogs, that sort of thing. But overall, when you don't really have much rushing at all, and Penix hasn't been incredible, yeah, last week can happen. London has 3 touchdowns, but I'm not banking on it. I would rather go to a guy like Jared Goff, especially when we're comparing Goff to these guys in the red over here. He has the lower floor, yes, because of that volume, but still the high ceiling, especially in this matchup. Same thing that I was talking about with J-Mo earlier. They're 32nd against explosive passes. What you're hoping for is with what Sam Darnold gave us last week. Like, yeah, they might blow out Mariota and the Commanders, but how do they do it? A lot of that can come through the air. They have a strong run D, the Commanders do, but the Lions are projected for over 28 points in this game. So if they do score 30, and Goff has those explosive pass plays against a pass defense that is banged up and a lot worse than their run D, well, I think it could be a good day for Goff. If you need that flyer quarterback, that fringe quarterback 1 on the week, I like him overall. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. Got to head out here. But leave any comments. I'll try to get back. I have an insane weekend, I will say. So if I don't get back, I apologize. But maybe if you're in there and you have your own advice to give, reply to other people's comments. Thank you, and see you soon.